Everybody out there, it's Forex Focus. I'm Pete Momat.
And it's Friday.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
And you are?
Glenn Freiberger.
That's right.
I'm getting more airtime. Thanks
Look at
for
you.
that.
Fantastic. It's great to sit with you. I haven't been here in a while.
I know. Glad to have an esteemed gentleman such as yourself.
And how are you this Friday?
Good. It's been a fun week. If you missed us yesterday, Frank and I.
Fantastic hour, guys.
Whole hour. It was a lot of fun.
So this is why the screwdriver's in the office.
Yes.
Was it at like 43 minutes you were thinking about shivving him, or did you?
Yeah.
Did you have more
I had
patience?
it. I had it like this the whole time under my desk, and it was just by the 8th time he mentioned that he did math at Michigan, I almost just threw it over the screen. But
yeah, thank God he's got 11 fingers.
One to lose, and he acts like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
9 lives.
Amazing.
What do you got this weekend?
It's Father's Day, so I just expect to get showered with gifts and love.
Booyah. Man.
I have no idea.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's...
People coming over Sunday, maybe?
I think my kids are coming over, or my daughter-in-law is. She's an amazing cook. I'm not a good cook, so I've tried to cook things like ribs, which I love, and never done it right. Again, I have a hard time focusing on cooking, so I will go out and put ribs on the barbecue and then look like, that gutter isn't right. And then start fiddling, and I look over, and it's like the ribs are on fire, and my wife's beating on the glass. So how about you?
I don't think I'll get showered with anything. My sister has a birthday, or baby shower.
Oh, very nice.
On Saturday, so heading out to Oak Park for that.
Exciting.
Taste of Randolph is here in the West Loop.
Gotta hate it.
Yeah. Luckily,
it took me 2.5 hours to get home last night.
Yeah.
First, the knuckleheads.
Just to get on the highway.
I couldn't even get on the highway.
Yeah.
I had to go all the way to the outer drive. Taste of Randolph, torturing. We were in the West Loop, and they block off like 5 blocks.
It goes pretty far. It goes
forever. And the highway is now like Thunderdome because of the protests.
Oh, man.
So it's been a miserable couple of days driving home.
Yeah. Well,
are you going to go to this Taste of Randolph?
I live very close by, so yeah, I think I'll go walk around. Probably what I did last year, lap all the way to the end, lap back. We've got a very nice selection of restaurants, but what they do is instead of dining there, they put a tent out in front and then serve their appetizers for $20 each. So
it sounds like
a
signature.
Now,
are you doing
dish.
that solo or with the missus?
Mrs., friends, whoever's around.
You like to travel in a pack, don't you? It's just
Always.
not the two of you. It's
Entourage.
It really is.
If I can get my life to be like Entourage, I've made it. I haven't found my my Vinny Chase.
I was going to say.
I thought I had a couple
You're certainly
leads.
not the turtle. Who are
Thank you.
Are you the Johnny Drama?
No,
or the E?
We actually have a friend that talks just like Johnny Drama.
Oh, there you go.
And he hates it that we say that. So I think I'm more like E.
Okay. Good place to be.
Yeah.
Very well for him.
Not bad.
Speaking about ending well, we certainly have some activity in the markets.
Absolutely.
Let's jump over the platform.
Not the Friday morning you'd expect here today. Looking at the Tasty Trade web platform, mover of the day, crude oil.
Yeah.
I mean, news overnight, Israel struck Iran, 5 waves of air attacks. Iran promising.
They did.
They
first
did retaliate.
round of missiles and drones are in flight in the other direction right now.
And this is substantially impactful for crude oil here.
Yeah.
I mean, we got all the way up to, 70?
A shade under $78.
Holy smoke. So up 8%, just about.
So at its peak, a 12% move up to down.
Wow.
Now, since then, we've given back $5. Still a healthy move to the upside, but if you look at U.S. equities, SPOOs were down 100 points at one point. They've recouped almost half that. So they're down, I think, last time I looked, and maybe they're moving around a little bit, but they're down about 50 points. Just ES.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, down almost 1%.
Right. But so it seems like, given if the activity, it seems like this is going to probably go back and forth over the weekend. They'll use the time to rearm, reload, possibly, and they'll use night again to conduct back and forth. The market is basically telling us that if stays constrained to conventional weapons in these two countries. They've kind of adjusted for that, moved on.
Yeah.
But we're going into a weekend, which is interesting. So this is something we should talk a little bit about is we don't have access to product over the weekend. So how do we best think about our positions and our movement? And you take a look at almost a percent move in euro. 82 ticks
US
down.
dollar is the very interesting wrinkle in this because it's our US's involvement in this or lack thereof is kind of leading these currency markets in a way you wouldn't quite expect. US dollar really getting no safe haven demand, flying all the way to dollar Swiss franc. This was the big mover of last night, now bouncing back, but got all the way down to
Right.
near 80 cents. What do we make of this? So the U.S. Was not involved.
Right.
They wanted, and the main headline for the U.S. is that we had nuclear talks scheduled with
Right.
Iran, and those are now shelved.
Right.
Is that it, or is there? What would make the Swiss franc get so much more demand than the U.S. dollar or even the Japanese yen? This one really the mover last night.
This is it showing its flight to quality status. Yen had a more muted reaction, but the same general piece to it. Gold was up $60, $70 and is already giving back a good chunk of that. U.S. Treasuries set new highs at 115. They've given back a point on that. So as U.S. players come in, we're seeing some of the extremes getting marked down pretty good. Now, euros fall, dollar strength. 80 points in the euro is a lot. 80 pips in the euro is a lot. But let's think of where we were.
Yeah.
Again, we were breaching 116. So is this a rush to the dollar as a safe haven currency? No. I mean, it's a pullback off of new highs. So general, I can't look at a pullback to 115 because, again, 3 months ago, we would have said, again, 115 was the inflection point. 1480 was the extreme. Well, the extreme was thoroughly vetted and violated yesterday. We're right back to that same spot again. So pullback, sure. A little bit of buying of dollars, safe haven or not. Swiss yen over exemplifying that. But that getting chopped back a little bit. What we're not seeing is, again, the Swiss coming back a little, the dollar coming back a little bit against the Swiss. Euro, we're not getting the bounce. But again, this was more dynamic to the downside in terms of the euro move and a little bit of this being marked out quicker. You would think, well, why don't we see the bounce in euro back to 115.35 or 40? We might during the day, but considering the extreme we were at, I think it's going to be a little harder to find. I think the currencies right now, they've taken the edge off the top, and it's going to be a little bit more interesting to see how that plays through as we go through. I think the interesting part is now Aussie's up.
Bouncing back, but got hit really hard.
Right.
Almost a percent move, 50 pips to the downside immediately following that news. Kind of some chop overnight where other markets we saw either a strong bounce back or further lows. Here, do you anticipate this being more range bound heading into the weekend, or
again,
is weekend risk a big factor here? And how does that play out throughout a Friday? Is this already priced in as the uncertainty? And right now, like you said, if we just stick to conventional warfare, this is what the market's pricing in right now, or will we see people enter the markets continually throughout this U.S. trading session and either take off exposure or put on safe haven plays? From a time perspective, how do you expect that to play out?
It's a great question because I think what you could take away from the scope of these moves, and obviously we're in a much lower volatility environment than when we were a month ago, a little bit of the froth has been taken out. this is a second order market. What I mean is most impacted markets were crude oil and U.S. equities and treasuries. The dollar wasn't necessarily the prime mover of on the geopolitical news. You can look at this two ways. If you really think the dollar long term is, I mean, again, let's just jump out to the daily here on Aussie because I think the context is important. And let's tighten it up a little bit. Again, when you look at this, I go back to this is such a materially different chart than euro. Euro at 116. Are we well off the 60-cent low? Sure. And we did breach 65 cents, which has been kind of an inflection point. If you're looking at something that this is really, given current situation, is not going to be impactful to currencies. The Aussie has pulled back a little bit. It's giving you an opportunity to not buy a new high or not have to buy a higher low. And I think it's also reflective of a market that isn't at an upper extreme. It's recentering to, we'll call it a 65 to 70 cent range potentially. So this is kind of, if you're dollar bearish, this is a little bit more interesting than looking at nibbling at euro at 115. To me, I think that you hit on the variable. If the U.S. plays a more direct role, does the U.S. dollar get stronger on that?
That's what I don't know. I can't tell.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that the risk of this staying where it is and just them exchanging another round or two, and not saying that lightly because it's horrible. From a trader's perspective, there wasn't much of a reaction. The dollar wasn't that enticing a thing. So to be bought into. Now, does that speak to, okay, if this doesn't make the dollar really have some legs to the rally? In other words, why aren't we at 113?
Right.
Why are we at 115? Why do we see such a small, we're not at 63 cent Aussie, we're at 64.5 cent Aussie. That tells you something about market structure and the impact of the event. Impact of the event, very mild second order effect. So going into the weekend, I think you probably want to think about sizing.
What a gap would mean for your position.
And I would be much more mindful of my crude position, my U.S. equities positions, than necessarily my currency positions. I would think that, is there a play to get into and try to figure out, well, if they escalate it more,
right,
maybe there's more dollar buying? I don't think you look at that here. It will be interesting to see if we end up, if this is the worst they can do in terms of euro bullishness, is knock it down 100 points from a spike high. I think that I wouldn't be a seller up there at Friday afternoon thinking that more risk or more war is going to help me.
Right.
So I think there's a little bit of chop to be done. And, if we do see a leg lower, then maybe the highs put in, and I'd be more mindful of being long going into the weekend. But if you've had a nice run on the longs, maybe you trim a little, but the tape action is telling you that this doesn't really, it really isn't that impactful to you.
Yeah, but if history repeats itself, we have a recent example here in, I can't remember if it was March or this April, big jump in euro was on a weekend news of European EU involvement in the Russia-Ukraine war that categorically, at the time I didn't anticipate it, but categorically recentered this trading range in the euro dollar. Could something like that happen here to either side where the U.S. not involved decides to get involved, makes the situation better for everyone, better for the U.S., not sure, or could we see the European Union do the same thing, mass defense spending to try and step into this? Is there any risk to either side there?
I think I think the Europeans have bigger problems closer
Okay.
to home. I don't think they're going to put a fork into this. I'm sure Europe will offer to intermediate. So I don't think that becomes the effect. It's whether the U.S.
Okay.
becomes more actively involved. And if they are, you've got to think about, does that trigger the U.S. dollar safe haven flows, or does it trigger again, this is another level of, I think the last 3 months has told you a story. There is less conviction around wanting to be long
100%.
dollars. So
Definitely room to the
I
downside
would say,
here.
you know what?
If they do.
I don't think so, to tell you the truth. I don't think we see 113 or 112 if they get engaged in this war. I think if they ratchet it up, I don't know why the dollar becomes more of a safe haven when they're an active participant in an armed conflict 6,000 miles away.
That's true.
So, the market is wonderful at digesting all these variables and pricing in that tail risk. And what it's telling you right now is that they don't see it as that impactful. And if the escalation comes, if it was, we would see, again, unfortunately, and hopefully at some point we can look at put call skew, but the pricing is telling me that there's not a lot of people necessarily looking at things stay the same. Maybe we resume the trek up to 116, or if things escalate, we're going to trade 112.
Okay.
You're not seeing that in tape action. Or if we were down below 114, 113.80. So in other words, all those bars over the last 10 days are challenged. Very different market structure. And I'd say then you have a different posture. If we can't get under 115
Couldn't even
throughout this morning, everybody who sold the spike now has to decide what are they going to carry into the weekend. And maybe we trade a little bit higher. I'm not saying I'm bullish euro at these levels. I tend to be a bit of a contrarian, but I'm not inclined to sit short going into this either. So I think Aussie's a little bit more interesting. Canada's a little bit more reserved, a little bit more muted.
Yeah, definitely more muted.
Yeah.
But do we see is there anything interesting in the cross space? These moves a lot less magnitude.
Let's take a look at euro yen. Euro yen, second largest traded cross out there. Again,
Some
the
big
overperformance
action,
of euro continues to take place. Let's get a little bit more granular there, my friend. Okay.
So we had some instant safe haven demand, looking pretty similar to a U.S. dollar chart.
Yep. Much more of a reversion back into the middle of the range. If you want, honestly, this is great because I would rather sell this than necessarily be selling euros right now. Because again, selling this means you're shorting euros and you're buying yen. If you think, again, yen will get a boost if there is more risk. Euro maybe sells a little bit lower or stays the same. Here, you're kind of leaning on the fact, I don't know what I'm saying with that statement is, I don't know quite what to do with the euro here.
Yep.
But I like having the yen against the euro rather than the dollar. And that's one of the great things with FX is we don't have to make everything dollar-based.
No.
So I honestly like the idea. I would be more inclined to, if I'm leaning on there may be a little bit more ratcheting. I can't get a clear idea in my mind what I want to do with the euro given that. Conventional wisdom would say, well, the next print is 113. Well, the market's telling you it's not. I'd rather be short some euro yen here.
Well, there you have it. Our daily wrap up on
Ton going
Forex.
on. Lots of different product to trade from. Lots of opportunity. The platform gives you a great ability to trade it. Euro yen. Again, this is a liquid, well-traded cross. And things like Aussie giving you a different profile into the market. So long-term, short-term, you've got different decisions to make, but different opportunities in different pairs, which is what I love to see as a trader. You can, depending on where you want to focus, you can create strategy built around it.
There you go. Big day ahead for us in financial markets. Make sure to manage all your positions. Might have some weekend risk as well, but a lot left in the day. So that'll do it for us on Forex Focus this morning. Have a good weekend, everybody. Happy trading, and stay tuned for Tom, Tony, and Vanetta up next on Tasty Live.
You can get up to $4,000 when you open and fund a new account with tastytrade. That's 4,000 buckaroos, 4,000 bills, or clams, 4,000 in dough or cheddar, not the cheesy kind. 4 large, 4K, 4 grand, which is no small thing. Open and fund a new tastytrade account and get on the platform for traders who just want to trade. And did we mention a bonus of up to 4,000 smackaroos? tastytrade. Make your move.
The beauty of Thinkorswim was that we were different. From the name to the